If you have an anxiety disorder, you didn't ask for that, you know? And so gently, with some comfort of yourself, carry it with you. And what happens is over time, it's not obstructing you from doing things you want to do. And it starts to dissipate. But if that's the goal, then it won't work, you know, because if the goal is I'm going to accept this fear so I can get rid of it, it kind of defies this adage, if you want to get out of it, get into it, you know? So it's not to get rid of it. It's just it will probably dissipate, but don't count on it. So it's kind of a paradox. The whole thing is paradoxical of acceptance and commitment therapy. But it's kind of like my perspective on ADHD. If you don't want it to obstruct your life, then don't say you can't do something. My mom, I grew up here in the South, and my mom, the way she talked was funny. You wouldn't be able to understand probably some of the things my family says with their Southern drawl. But my mom would always say, if I said I couldn't do something, she'd say, Kate never did nothing. You know, so it's like, don't say you can't. Don't say you can't do something.
ADHD Rewired, episode 357. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Terry Huff. Terry is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in adults with ADHD. He is a blogger and author of Living Well with ADHD, which came out in 2016. He has practiced in the Nashville area for 31 years. Terry is the founder of ADD Nashville, a support group he started in September 2005. He leads workshops and has presented at international conferences on ADHD. He has had personal meditation practice for over 25 years and is on the board of One Dharma Nashville. And I met Terry at I think it was 2 years ago, CHAD conference, when you were presenting. I think it was on meditation and mindfulness. Yeah, something like that. Sounds vaguely familiar, right? So Terry, welcome to the podcast. I'm glad to have you on.
It's my pleasure.
You know, we were talking before we hit record, and it had been a little while since we had spoken previously, and so I asked, wait, so what are we talking about again? And we were just like talking about this important idea of just accepting the brain you got. So that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to let listeners know a little bit more about you. Share a little bit about your story. So you're a licensed clinical social worker, but you also have ADHD yourself. So kind of how did this all unravel for you? What's your sort of origin story?
Well, I'll start in the middle, where I got diagnosed, and I'll tell you a little history. I was about 44 years old, and I had a lot of losses around me, and I just was starting a new job where I had to go back and forth between managing a program and directing and supervising and planning, which wasn't easy for me. But I had jobs where I had to plan before, but not go back and forth between focusing in psychotherapy with clients and then pull out and then do some work on management and supervision. And so I was a little depressed from all these losses. I had 6 or 7 people that were either relatives or friends of my family that had died. So I talked to a couple of psychiatrists I know. What do you do when you're in the mental health profession? You talk to your friends who are psychiatrists first, and then you go see someone who's out of town. So I did that. I drove about 10 miles south to see someone. That's what we do here, right? And so I said, David, I told him my story, and he treated me with an antidepressant, and I felt better. And I was just as disorganized as before. And that was my main concern, because with the depression, I thought, I'm just having so much trouble planning and organizing. But I didn't feel so bad about it, but I still needed to plan and organize, right? And so I read Ned Hallowell and John Rady's first book, Driven to Distraction. I'm sure you've heard this story before.
Yep.
It's like, oh my God, this is like my biography. This is me. And I took the book with me back to David and said, David, look, this is me. He asked me a few questions and agreed and prescribed dexedrine spancels for me, which I took for a couple of years until it turned the lights up on some atrial fib that was starting up. I didn't know, and I had to stop taking medicine. So for about 13 years, I couldn't take medicine until I had ablation surgeries to fix the AFib problem, and I had a couple of those surgeries. And then I took medicine again, but it was so much later. I discovered something else that had focused me so much. I totally lost open awareness. So I could get really focused, because you and I know this is not a disorder that is just inability to focus.
Right.
To so totally lose open awareness, which means I wouldn't have any idea what time it was, that my wife still lived in the house, that I needed to eat a meal. I mean, so I stopped taking medicine for a while. I take it once in a while now, but not every day because of that problem of losing open awareness. But that, in the meantime, I had been practicing meditation, beginning with Zen meditation, and then progressing to a little bit more open awareness, mindfulness meditation. And that helped me probably more than anything I've ever done. And so the combination of having this brain that was different because of the medicine, when I took medicine, Eric, the first day was like, oh my God, I want this brain. And prior to then, I've never been able to compare my brain to other people's brains. It's almost like trying someone else's eye. It was like, I want this one. So all that kind of played into my observing myself and observing other people and seeing what is this thing that we call mindfulness. It's become so ubiquitous. It means a lot of different things to different people. But this mindful awareness, not just of what's right in front of my face, that wasn't too hard. But I had a meditation teacher once who did a retreat here. And I found out years later, after this retreat I did with her, that she has ADHD, takes medicine for it, and she's one of the most respected, well-known teachers in the country, married to someone that's probably one of the most well-known in the world. And his name is Jack Kornfield. And I've heard who Jack Kornfield is. Well, Trudy, I've been told she's not private about this. So she is a psychologist, as Jack Kornfield is by training. She wasn't married to him at the time, but she did some retreats here. And I told her one day after a Dharma talk and some discussion, I said, since I practiced Zen meditation for about a decade, I can focus my attention so much better. But when I do, everything else goes away. I just lose awareness of everything else. That's how I presented it at the time. And she said, I think that you should practice Vipassana meditation some. Well, I'd read about that, but didn't know much about it. Never had a teacher who
What's it called again? Say it again.
Vipassana. It's basically mindfulness meditation or open awareness meditation.
Okay.
Now, when I say open awareness, I mean awareness of what's going on inside you internally. So there's this internal integration thing integrating your feelings and thoughts and actions. But there's also interpersonal integration. So awareness of other people, awareness of sounds around me. Mm-hmm. So now when I meditate, sometimes I meditate with sounds. I got a lot of birds in my backyard. So that I can move my awareness around to what I see, what I hear, what my body feels like, what I'm listening to, and I'm listening to someone else. And most important as a therapist, noticing my own reactions to what I'm hearing from people, and then having to abandon my presumptions. Like once in a while, I'll have a client that kind of scares me, and I'll feel this tenseness, someone who say owns guns and has views very different from mine. And so then I become aware that, wait a minute, I'm looking through this very narrow lens. I need to open this up and stay close here. And it made me aware with a couple of clients in particular that kind of scared me of how other people might respond to them. They probably scare everybody. And I think it was sort of a way of keeping people at a safe distance. Both of these people I'm thinking about right now had very severe post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think they ran everybody off. In fact, one time at an agency, I had the director call me and he said, "We've had a client here who's fired 2 therapists already. He's very angry. I'm seeing him myself. I'm not really a therapist for a couple of weeks until we could find someone. You're the person I thought would be really good to see this guy."
Like challenge accepted, or like, oh crap.
Oh crap was my first thought. It's like, you're not doing a great job of selling this client to me. And one day he got really angry at me, and I didn't know what was going on, but I became aware that, okay, he probably makes a lot of people either afraid or have some emotional reaction. I don't need to be one more person that he runs off. Mm-hmm. And that was such a good lesson for me. So I was a little late coming out of an appointment. This was at an agency, and I was told he's really angry and he's out by his car in the parking lot. And so he had his head under the hood of the car, and I don't know anything about cars, but I got on the other side and stuck my head under and asked him what was up. And it's interesting. He had made such an effort to get there and get there on time. And I ran over a little bit, and he was worried about his car also. And I softened a little bit and kind of, I felt this fear, but I thought, I don't need to have this get in my way of being who this person needs me to be for him. So I learned through meditation practice to get up close to people and to stay there and to be reliable for them. And I started getting so much trust from people that first scared me. And they risked some vulnerability and did some really amazing work. And that, my clients have taught me so much. And so the meditation helped me in my work, and hopefully it helps me in my other things I do in appreciating what people bring to this life. I mean, it's really amazing. I read Studs Terkel, a Chicago person. In fact, I got 2 of his books. I got a gap in my shelf back here because I went to bed with a couple of his books. And Studs Terkel, who was a radio person and an oral historian, and he interviewed people, you would learn about some things about race or World War II and labor from his interviews with people. And he was so artful, and he could get anybody to talk to him. And I think it's because he saw gold in everyone. And I think, I kind of think that Studs Terkel was mining for gold, wanting to see what's underneath the skin here. Who is this person? And I read a story of an interview he had that was so fascinating. So I've tried to carry that with me, to find the gold in people and discover them. And you have to hang in sometimes and know your own prejudices and feelings and thoughts that are rising within you, and suspend believing what your brain wants to tell you is the truth.
Let me ask you this. So, I've been a very inconsistent meditator for about 20 years or so.
Well, that's what we are if we have ADHD, right?
Right, totally. And it's like, why
I don't have a daily practice. I have an almost daily practice.
I bring back the practice when I'm going through periods of high stress and anxiety. And I'm frequently thinking, man, if I can maintain it when actually things are good in my life, like how powerful that would be. And I'm sure you come across this too, where people are like, oh, I can't meditate. Like I have ADHD. And, I think the whole idea of mindfulness-based meditation is that it's like the goal is not to quiet the mind. The goal is to notice the mind. Like, it's just
be with it. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that's such an important, thing for us as people with ADHD, when we notice all the things that like are distracting. We don't notice the things that we need to be noticing, right? And really just, I know for me, when I'm in a good meditation practice, I find that my both resistance to tasks that I don't want to do, like I notice the I don't want to thought, but then I'm like, oh wait, I'm doing the task already. Or just that pause, like that transition, like it's so much easier. It doesn't feel so like I don't have that internal resistance, or the thing that just sometimes feels so hard, like you're pushing a mountain or a boulder up a mountain. It just kind of doesn't. It feels more like pushing a beach ball up a mountain, where it's just like it just kind of goes.
Yeah, you know what I tell people who say I've got ADHD, I can't meditate, and then I say why? They say, well, my mind's all over the place. And I ask them, can you run a marathon tomorrow? Just begin. And they say, well, what if my mind's all over the place? And I say, well, don't bother, just watch it. You don't have to do anything about it. They think they have to try to stop their thoughts. And I tell them, you know what? You'll stop your thoughts when they bury you. But until then, you're going to have thoughts. Right. So relax into it. And just notice that your brain's jumping all over the place. That's the place you start from.
I like to tell people that when I'm coming back to a practice, that I know the first about week or so, I'm just going to be watching the theater of my mind, because there's just going to be like, oh, I want to focus on my breath. All right, let me show you what else is going on up there. Right.
Yeah, right.
So I don't have any sort of expectation that I'm going to be able to sustain my focus on my breath. I do this breathing exercise in my coaching groups, where I have people do this in and out, counting up to 10, 1 inhale, 1 exhale. And I said, but if you notice any other thought, you got to just start back at 1. Right. And almost without fail, I get to about 8 and my brain goes, you're almost there. And then I have to start back to 1.
I get it. Yesterday morning, I was meditating. I had a covered deck here in the back of my house, lots of birds here. And I often meditate with my eyes kind of half open. And so I was doing okay. I was occasionally doing a little work, on my CHAD presentation. So I'm doing a little work here. It's like, wait a minute, bring it back. And a woodpecker makes this noise. And I didn't know it was a woodpecker. I'm just hearing this, I look around and there's a woodpecker just landed in a tree about 20 yards from where I was sitting. And so that would have bothered me years ago, thinking, I can't meditate with all this going on around me. It was like, that's happening in the present moment.
Yeah.
Being with whatever I'm hearing, being here. I used to think I couldn't meditate with cats in the room back when I had cats, until my cats taught me otherwise. I thought, just quit bothering yourself about the cats. And so when I quit bothering myself and sat still, they were very still. They like to be up again. That's when they wanted to be around me. That's when I was sitting quietly. And then they meditated with me.
I always think that an itch during meditation is a gift.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like,
fly on the forehead.
I'm going to just notice it and I'm not going to respond to it. I'm going to notice that I want to respond to it, but and it's such a paradoxical thing. It kind of reminds me of that quote from Carl Rogers. It's the moment that we accept ourselves exactly as we are is the moment that we can begin to change.
That's right. I read that. Someone else said that before Carl Rogers. I can't remember who it was, but yeah. I just read that recently. I was sitting in with a Zen group once, and they were very, very disciplined. And we had the door open to this little center. It was just a big room, a little bitty kitchen off of it. And a dog came in through that open door. And we had all already started. We'd done an opening bell chant that we did. And the dog comes in, and I could see in my peripheral vision, because I got my eyes half closed, kind of focused straight ahead. But I could see this dog coming, stopping at every person and licking them and moving to the next one and the next one. I was so proud of this group that Nobody did anything about the dog. He just kept us right in the moment, That was a gift too. So it could be a fly on the forehead, driving you crazy with an itch. And, I tell you, if you want to scratch, you can scratch it. If you want to use it to enrich your practice, then you can see if you can sit with the itch. Either one's okay, But the dog licking, that was a lesson for the whole group.
And I think that mindfulness, we know from so much more research now how it affects the physiological structures of our brain. And it just, and it's just an amazing thing that mindfulness begins with just this acceptance of what is.
Yes. And you know what? I just learned rereading Richard Davidson's The Emotional Life of Your Brain. He's at the University of Wisconsin, and he studied the Dalai Lama recruited about, a dozen or so monks to have their brains scanned while they were meditating.
Yes.
And one of the things that he said in his book is that compassion can be learned. I thought that's interesting. And what his research shows, it suggests, is that when people practice a compassion type of meditation, there's something called Tonglen in Tibetan practice. People who practice this compassion meditation seem to strengthen the connections between the prefrontal cortex and other areas of the brain that are involved in empathy. So I find that interesting. So you could practice that. And I don't remember if it was him or someone else whose research showed that activity in the prefrontal cortex increases, which is what we ADHDers need. It happens when we take stimulant medication. And activity in the parietal lobes actually decreases. So among other functions of the parietal lobes, which is right here where people wear a yarmulke, it's where I have a bald spot. There, among other things that the parietal lobes do, there's one in each hemisphere, is they're involved in helping us sense that our body is separate from our environment so we can navigate in the environment. The analogy I saw was of a robot. The first robot built took about 10 hours to go across the room, around an obstacle, and out the door and take a left turn. So think about this. So when you meditate, you feel more connected to your environment, to other people. And we're all breathing the same air. You become more aware of that. So researchers found that when you practice meditation or even contemplative prayer or sing hymns, or that people feel one with other people. Isn't that interesting? Mm. And you've heard how Buddhists order pizza. I'll have one with everything.
One with everything.
So when we meditate, we have this sense of connection. So I really think it helps us be aware of the truth of our need for one another and our connection in this world.
What I want to do is just take a moment to take a quick break. And then when we come back, let's just continue on this conversation, because I think that we talk a lot about awareness and self-acceptance on the show. And I think it's a conversation that doesn't ever get old, because, acceptance is an ongoing process that we are kind of working through kind of forever. And as soon as we can accept that, it's the journey can be much more enjoyable. So we will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from the ADHD reWired coaching community, which includes our intensive coaching and accountability groups and our alumni membership community. Happy New Year to everyone. If you are new to the podcast, welcome to ADHD reWired. Hoping that everyone had a healthy and safe holiday. We have arrived. 2021 is here, and there's a lot of good things to look forward to, like the real possibility of the end of this pandemic and a return to normal life. Also, we have passed the longest day of the year, and spring is around the corner. Our winter coaching groups are full. And speaking of spring, why not go to coachingrewired.com and click on the green button to add yourself to a growing list of people who will be receiving information about our next season of coaching and accountability groups. Right now, go to coachingrewired.com and click on that green button. What are these groups? Well, let me tell you, since 2014, community has been at the core of what ADHD rewired is. And a huge part of our community is our coaching community, which includes our 10-week intensive coaching and accountability groups and our alumni membership community, where coaching group alumni continue to get support once their coaching groups end. The spring sessions are April 7th through June 18th. Registration is by invitation only, so if you want to make sure that you get invited when registration opens, go to coachingrewired.com and click on the green button. You will get all the information to attend our invitation-only registration event this March. To learn more, go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. Last week, I announced that right now we are in the process of building out a brand new membership so you never have to work alone again. Go to adultstudyhall.com and add your name to the list to get your chance at locking in our founder's rate of only $9.99 a month. That's half off what our standard membership fee will be. We will be giving the first 100 members, our founders, the chance to lock in this rate. Our Adult Study Hall will allow you to work together with other adults with ADHD on Zoom. This will be different from Focus at Will because we will be offering a growing schedule, structured and themed work sessions. We'll start you off with a couple questions to help you define your work task, and you'll get to report back at the end of your work task. We're going to have a variety of themed work sessions, including email processing, chores, laundry, writing, extended Pomodoro sessions, and more. And if you just want to hop in a Zoom room to work, we will also offer our Adult Study Hall on demand, which will be open 24 hours a day. You stay muted, share what you're working on in the chat, and stay as long as you'd like. Right now, we are pushing to launch at the very end of January. This might be a bit of a stretch goal, but we are going for it. Adult Study Hall is where you get to work together on Zoom, doing the important but sometimes boring stuff, or the stuff that I like to call the important stuff. If you are interested in being an Adult Study Hall facilitator, we will be posting an application on adultstudyhall.com in the next week or so. So check back often as we are building this out in pieces and aren't waiting until we have everything to launch. We will be offering our first 100 founding members 50% off their membership for the life of their membership. Become a founding member and you can join for only $9.99 a month. And as long as you stay an active member, your price will never go up. This price will be limited to the first 100 founding members. We will have more information in the weeks ahead. If you want to be a founding member, go to adultstudyhall.com and let us know. That's adultstudyhall.com. All right, we are back. Now, I was curious, do you teach and guide people in meditation?
I try not to.
Okay, say why.
And here's why. I read something. I misunderstood some research once, and I think my misunderstanding has helped me, actually. Now I'm thinking I misunderstood it. I read an article once that suggested that therapists who have a meditation practice have better outcomes than therapists who teach their clients to meditate. I went back and looked for that, and I saw something a little bit different, but it suggests something similar. And because in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, people actually teach a little something.
Explain what that is, just for listeners who don't know what that is.
Mindfulness-based
cognitive therapy.
Therapy. Yeah, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, as I understand it, involves both helping people get a perspective from mindfulness, but also teaching some practices and having people actually practice, as opposed to acceptance and commitment therapy and the mindfulness-based stress reduction that John Kabat-Zinn teaches, are really more about I think it's more helpful from those perspectives for the professional helper to be mindful and practice that. Of course, in MBSR, they do teach meditation to patients in hospitals and all, and it's been very helpful in their healing. So these are all variations of the same thing. I kind of like dialectical behavior therapy, and I had some training with Marsha Linehan, who developed that some years ago. I actually cheated and read her book and pretended to have taken the first beginner's course because I get bored easily because I have ADHD, right? So I read her book and took an advanced course, and it was really interesting to have done that. And I read a workbook of Stephen Hayes called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, which is about acceptance and commitment therapy. And of all of this, I'm really drawn to the acceptance and commitment therapy because you don't have to become a meditator, but it's from the perspective of mindfulness and acceptance. So there's this acceptance and willingness that kind of go hand in hand. So if you, let's say, for example, if you're unwilling to feel anxiety when you have to make a phone call to someone who, is waiting on your call, they're angry at you. If you decide today, you know what, I don't have to call them today, I'll call them tomorrow. You turn that dial down, on the willingness, and this corresponding dial on the discomfort, the anxious discomfort, comes all the way down too. So if you avoid, you can turn that discomfort down immediately, but in the long run, you create more anxiety because you learn to avoid things.
It works until it doesn't.
Yeah, right. So if you're willing to not have the anxiety obstruct you from your life, then you got to be willing to experience some of that anxious discomfort so that it doesn't get in your way. Now, it's not like being really tough, like in Talladega Nights, where Will Ferrell has a dad who puts what looks like drugs, tapes them under his car and says, they're drugs, the cops are coming. Face your fears, or put a cougar in the back seat of your car and see if you can drive that way. I don't know if you saw the movie. It's a silly movie. So not like face your fears, like being a tough guy. It's like, in fact, I suggest people be gentle with yourself. This is not comfortable. You're doing something courageous just to carry it with you. And if you have an anxiety disorder, you didn't ask for that, And so gently, with some comfort of yourself, carry it with you. And what happens is, over time, it's not obstructing you from doing things you want to do. And it starts to dissipate. But if that's the goal, then it won't work, because if the goal is I'm going to accept this fear so I can get rid of it, it kind of defies this adage, if you want to get out of it, get into it, So it's not to get rid of it. It's just it will probably dissipate, but don't count on it. So it's kind of a paradox. The whole thing is paradoxical of acceptance and commitment therapy. But it's kind of like my perspective on ADHD. If you don't want it to obstruct your life, then don't say you can't do something. My mom, I grew up here in the South, and my mom, the way she talked was funny. You wouldn't be able to understand probably some of the things my family says with their Southern drawl. But my mom would always say, if I said I couldn't do something, she'd say, Kate never did nothing. So it's like, don't say you can't. Yeah. Don't say you can't do something.
That goes to Carol Dweck's work on mindset, and just, say, well, if you say you can't do it, just add the word yet to the end of that.
Oh, well, I like that. And, so I tell people too who have ADHD, you don't have to do it like people who don't have ADHD. So I say, you're in the 5% club. Don't try to be in the 9% club, because that'll cause you problems if you think you've got to do it like the other people, the neurotypicals, as we might call them. So I said in my book, if you have ADHD, act like you know it.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean, accept that your brain is different and that it's okay. It's because we're such a small minority. Those of us who are adults who have the diagnosis are like, 4.4%?
About that,
We know there are more. But as far as having the diagnosis, and so we're not getting support from the majority. In fact, the majority don't have a clue what it's like, living with this brain. that's why I like my support group. We're 100% ADHD, except now I have a co-leader who doesn't have ADHD. She's a great ADHD coach and professional organizer. And I mean, we get the topic out early now. I get there on time. We don't let people interrupt. We have guidelines. I mean, Sarah has been such a gift to the group. But I want people to know, and we have some very successful people in the group and some people that are really struggling. But I want people to know that we're okay finding our way of doing things and actually not even bothering ourselves by some things that would, that are ADHD related. If there are things that aren't really causing you a problem or causing your spouse a problem or family, maybe you don't need to worry so much about that. Or maybe you need to worry about only with your spouse. My wife teams up really well with me and I'm very lucky because it's hard on spouses. It was very hard on her. It's amazing that we made it. And we've been married 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
She went to the very first ADA conference. It was in Chicago. Well, it was outside of Chicago. It was in Merrillville, Indiana, of all places. And so we had to fly to Midway and then drive south. And I said, why don't you go? We thought it was closer to Chicago than it was. And we liked Chicago. I said, why don't you go with me? So she went and signed up for some classes. And she saw some of Daniel Amen's color slides of brain scans. And her response to that was, oh my God. She's a health professional. Oh my God, he can't help it. So when he said he didn't remember, maybe he didn't remember, And Eric, I'll never forget the first time she said to me with a smile on her face, you really don't remember what I just told you 30 minutes ago, do you?
Like it was this acceptance piece, it sounds like.
I think I made a story up just to make her laugh. Yeah, you said something about an elephant or whatever, but normally prior to then, she would have said, if it were important to you, you'd have remembered. Right?
We've all heard. I mean, even though you're telling you a story, there was this little part of me that goes, "Oh God!" Like how many times I've heard something like that, right? It's,
yeah. And now I'll say, I probably heard it, but I wasn't present. I have no idea what you said to me. Yeah. Would you say it again? And she accepts that now. Most of the time.
Well, I don't think we could expect anyone in our lives to fully accept what we're doing and not get frustrated. I mean, it's like, myself, I accept my ADHD like 99.8% of the time, but there are still some times where I get frustrated with my ADHD and it's like, but, because I'm a human being and, it doesn't matter like how all the strategies I've learned, all the work I've done on myself. It's like sometimes like, the ADHD comes back and just it wins. And it's just like, it's really defeating sometimes. I mean, Terry, I'll tell you, I'm not sure when this episode is going to air, but, so I was invited to be on 2 panels for this year's CHAD conference. And I don't work on the weekends, right? So like I have a pretty good boundary on my weekend work. But the only time that we could record this panel was on a Sunday. I'm really good, Terry, at looking at my calendar Monday through Friday. I was out playing pickleball on Sunday. I get back in my car and I see these text messages. Eric, where are you? We're about to start. And I mean, I was in such a shame spiral from that. And it was just like, oh no, and I share the story because I want people to know that because people have this illusion sometimes that like I have this podcast, I have these coaching groups that I have my shit together. And I really think it's important that people know that like I have a lot of my shit together, but I don't fully have my shit together. Like that's a fault. Like I have ADHD, right? Like I do pretty good most of the time, but there are certain things that like I struggle with. And then there are certain things that I screw up on. And I work really hard at minimizing that, but it's going to still happen sometimes.
Oh, yeah. And some days you fully have your shit together and some days not at all, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
Oh, gosh, you remind me of a story that I'm embarrassed to tell, but I'll tell it because I want people to know, that it's okay. That
it feels good to tell these stories, it's.
I was so proud of myself. One morning I was getting to work a little early and I I'm feeling that pride. I get up to a traffic light and it hit me that I was supposed to be at a meeting at a school for a kid. And that meeting, getting to that meeting in rush hour meant allowing maybe 40 minutes to get there, at least a half hour. But I was willing to drive real fast once I realized what I'd done. So on my way to this school for this meeting that I was already going to be missing, I was not going to get there in time, I tried to call the school and I had trouble. I finally got someone and I said, they didn't know about the meeting. I finally told them who I was and they finally got through. There's a meeting and running late. When I got there, the meeting was ending. I never even went into the room. The family I was seeing came out, and the group of school staff were coming out, and I felt such shame. I never saw them again. I'm sure they thought, how could someone like him help our kid?
Yeah.
And I had to accept that, yes, yeah.
I feel that.
Me.
Oh, I feel that. And it is, it's, we, like we can either be mad at ourselves about it there's this sort of like corrective element of like that self-disappointment to try to do better. But it's like beating ourselves up about it we don't
learn anything
right?
if we do that. Yeah.
Right. I tell people if I thought that beating ourselves up was an effective approach to doing better, that I would create very specific like lesson plans and strategies for the best, most efficient, productive way to beat yourself up. Right. But it's, and I think sometimes when you like bring something like that to the most absurd like ideation, it becomes
a daily practice of self-beating. Yeah. Right.
It's like, no, of course that's not helpful. Right.
Yeah. Well, it points in the wrong direction. It's as if motivation is a problem. So that's why punishment doesn't work well with people. Even rewards don't so well because, I actually met B.F. Skinner once in Chicago in the 1970s and had a conversation with him because I had a friend who knew how to get us into a conversation with B.F. Skinner.
Oh, wow.
And so I was back years ago, I was a dyed-in-the-wool behaviorist until I learned better. But, all behavior is motivated, and all that B.F. Skinner did with his rat studies and his behavioral work was to demonstrate changes you can make with consequences to behavior, mostly positive consequences to reinforce desired behavior. Well, our problem has nothing to do with consequences and motivation. And that's why I tell people, parents, the rewards and punishments, we got to operate in the world as it is, and maybe it teaches a little lesson, but it's not going to get at what our main problem is. What you do on the front end is much more important than what you do on the back end. So preventing the problems in your life that your ADHD could cause you is the way. And I wrestle for years with, well, how do you deal with impulsive behavior? Because parents want to say to their kids, well, think before you act next time, right? It's like saying, don't have ADHD next time, And I thought about this. And so what I learned to do was to help prepare people for situations in which their ADHD was likely to cause them a problem. Good example is when I'm with my wife's extended family, there are certain things I'm not supposed to talk about. And my wife knows that I'm high risk for bringing up one of those subjects that's off limits.
Oh, man.
She tried kicking me under the table one time, and I said, you can't do that. That makes me angry. Try something else. And so she has some signals that she gives me. Sometimes it's a look, like this, with the head turned a little bit and looking me out of the
it's
side.
It's a stink eye.
Yeah. So now I know, okay, we're going to be with their family, and that's a high-risk situation for me. So I'm going to go in with this planned ahead of time, and it makes it a little less likely that I'll impulsively do something that embarrasses her. She embarrasses easily, unfortunately. But she helps.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we will finish this conversation. Maybe talking about some more strategies for just accepting the brain that we got.
Mm-hmm.
So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from patrons who support us over on Patreon. Ad-free episodes are coming to our patrons who give $5 a month or more. If it's not up by the time this podcast airs, it will be by next week. Patrons will also get access to a private RSS feed, which is a link that you can copy and add to just about any podcast app. So once you do this step, your ad-free episodes will be updated automatically. We will have instructions to make this as ADHD friendly as possible. I want to welcome Marin O at the $5 a month level as a patron to ADHD Rewired. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate everyone's support. And remember, all patrons who give $25 a month or more can join me on the fourth Tuesday of every month for a group coaching call on Zoom at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And our next one is on January 26th. You can support ADHD Rewired even if you don't care about the perks. Maybe you're just one of those people who get so much value from the podcast that you feel called to say thank you with a monthly financial contribution. Thank you for being a patron. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com, and just click the Patreon tab at the top of the page. And thanks. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. Check out our other podcast. We got one for parents and educators called ADHD Essentials, and we got a shorter one called Hacking Your ADHD. And this January, be on the lookout for the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle and ADHD Diversified. And check out our most recent episode of ADHD Essentials. Brendan interviewed me, and I went over my process for yearly planning. I also share something that I haven't shared anywhere else. And you can join all of us from the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network on our next live Q&A of 2021 on Tuesday, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We do these every second Tuesday of the month at the same time. To register, go to ADHDrewired.com/events. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. We'll see you there. All right. We are back with Terry Huff. So we could probably have like a 3-hour podcast on all the ways that the ADHD is one, and all the stories that we could share of our screw ups. Right. And I think that those stories are helpful for listeners to know that like we can have these mistakes and still accept our brain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we love the challenges that we have, right? Except I think there's sometimes this misnomer between acceptance and just like waving the white flag.
Yeah. I like I tell my clients, and I do this myself as often as I can be mindful to do it, is wake up every morning and say, today I have ADHD. You know, and included in that notion is that I am capable of doing some ADHD boneheaded thing. I'm capable. So if I say I've got ADHD today and I'm capable of doing some boneheaded thing, I'm less likely to, you know?
Yeah.
So that's like training yourself to be mindful about your mindlessness, you know? And like you said, I'm still able to miss some real important thing, forget an important date, or rely on memory. I mean, that's silly in itself. I asked a kid one time who was going on 18. He was a pitcher, and I heard he was really good, and he was missing appointments. His mother sent me a note when they got a missed appointment charge or two. We didn't know about this. Would you schedule with the parents? And I called her up. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something better. So when he came next time, I gave him his appointment card. I asked what was happening. He said, I've been losing the appointment card. As soon as I walk out of here, I lose it. I said, do you have a voicemail? He said, yes. This was back when people use their voicemails on their landlines. So, or machines, you know. So I said, call I asked him if he had, voicemail at home. He said yes. And I said, call it and read what's on your card, because the memory there is much more reliable than what's under your baseball cap. And I asked him, I said, if you didn't have a right arm, would you use it? He was a righty. He was a pitcher. And he looked at me like crazy. And I said, if you wouldn't use the right arm if you didn't have one, you don't have a reliable memory. So why are you relying on that?
Yeah.
You don't have to rely on your memory.
Yeah. We call it CRS. Can't remember shit. Right. It's just like, hey, as long as you can remember that you can't remember shit, then you're all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Or always have a calendar with you, something, and accept. Yeah. You talk about acceptance. Accept that your memory is not reliable and it's not likely to be a problem for you.
It was interesting. I in my coaching groups, I've recently started shifting one of the questions that I ask very frequently. I will often ask my clients, how will you remember that? And I'm starting to change just a little bit of the wording on that. And it's, how will you be reminded of that?
Like that. Yeah. My wife once said to me, I thought this was brilliant. She said, what do you need to do now to be sure that you're at the accountant's office at 4:00 this afternoon? What do you need to do? Isn't that brilliant? She didn't say, I'm going to remind you, I'm going to call you, here's what you need to do.
Right, because if she would have said to you, don't forget, you're like, yeah, I got it. And you would have meant it. And then
yes. And I would have forgotten it. She knew that.
Right.
So I go to the office. I was in a busy practice with office staff then, and I had to put it on my calendar. And Ann had already called her because she knew her as a kid growing up. She knew this one receptionist, and she said, "We'll do anything Ann tells us to do." and I made it, because every time I came out to look for my next client, I would look at my schedule, and there it was, 4:00, accountant's office.
Well, what are some other things that are helpful for you? Maybe specific things that listeners kind of take away if they are, in this battle with themselves and their ADHD, having a hard time just accepting the brain that they got. What are some kind of maybe a couple concrete things that they can maybe practice?
One thing I suggest to people is an easy thing to do is find a meditation teacher. And I try to help them understand you can do this and you can actually enjoy it. So that you don't have to, pay for therapy time to be taught to do that. If you can simplify it, why not? If you can find someone that can help with this, why not do that? Why not make it easy? It's just like having a coach or an organizer. Someone's moving from one home to another, get an organizer.
Yeah.
Make it.
I don't know if you know, Derek, I know that obviously we're not even probably halfway through COVID, and we're recording this in late September. A lot of therapists are working online. Are there are meditation instructors doing the same thing now? Yes, there are. Yeah. So you can get online. You could get on One Dharma Nashville site anywhere you are and practice with One Dharma. Or with Insight LA in Los Angeles, where Trudy Goodman's the founder of Insight LA. And she's now with her husband, Jack Kornfield, at Spirit Rock in Marin County, California. So I think some of these things you pay for, it's like a seminar, they're all made affordable. And they usually give scholarships. So like when we have a retreat with One Dharma, people can't afford the retreat fee, then we say, well, we'll reduce your fee so you can do it. Yeah. The other thing, as far as being present and, with part of acceptance is just being present right where you are, is you don't have to become a meditator to put your hands on something around you and feel the texture of it, or listen to sounds that are in this moment, notice, do a body scan and notice how your body feels right now. How does it feel when you're anxious? I feel anxiety right up here under the rib cage at the upper part of my abdomen. See if you can locate where a feeling is right now, And so there's some actually people that are doing this with combat veterans who have PTSD. Have them look down at their feet. Look down at their feet. You see what your feet are like right now, and you can feel wiggle your toes, Casey Dixon. Yeah,
Casey has this mindfully-add.com, I think it's called.
Yeah, I had her on the podcast many years ago.
Yeah, she has these little things that people do that just take seconds to do. I call them resets, you just pause. And this is something, we ADHDers need to do. And maybe that's one of the best things we can do is pause. Pause so we can access more of our brain. Just pause and notice something in your surroundings. And that's mindfulness where the rubber meets the road in real time.
Terry Huff, author of Living Well with ADHD. How can people find more out about you?
About me or the book?
Yes.
I have a website, terrymhuff.com. And you can, if people want to check out the book first before buying it, you can check on their drop-down windows. And one on the book gives a little annotation of each chapter. So if it doesn't look like it's something you need, you don't get it. If you want to buy it, you can click on the book on the homepage, and it sends you to Specialty Press, which is part of the ADD Warehouse, and purchase it there.
Awesome. And we will link to those things on the show notes for this episode, which is will be at ADHDrewired.com/whatever episode number this is. Just put that after the slash, or just come to the website and you'll see that at the website. You'll search Terry Huff and you'll find the show notes. Terry, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing some stories with us and helping us accept that brain that we got.
Eric, I got to tell you, you do a great service. You do a good job with this. I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I'm glad you enjoy what you do.
I do. It's fun. I often think that I have the best job ever because this is very little of my workday actually feels like work. And I think it's one of the secrets of a good life with ADHD is work doesn't have to feel hard.
Joy and ease of being. I love this phrase, ease of being.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we hope that you listeners have ease of being for the rest of your day. And we'll catch you back here next week. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability, and if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.